Hi, welcome to the breadboard. In this video we're going to be looking at some Pi enclosures. The reason for this is because I was looking at starting a few more tutorial videos and I was gathering together some of the parts and realized that I have a lot of my Pis just sitting there powered on doing things from my home and they're not even in enclosures. To highlight that fact, that's two of them. They're on my desk in my office and they've been sitting this way for probably over a year. One of them is running my Home Assistant and the other one is running Node-RED and a bunch of things like that and some database things and taking pictures with this camera that's just sitting here looking at the ceiling. They've been working just fine. They've never had an issue, but as you can see I've got screws and all sorts of things nearby. They're a little bit risky of being shorted out, disconnected, damage happening to them. So I wanted to put them in a case, and as it happens, a company called Matic, they specialize in cases for the Raspberry Pis and things like that, offered to send me some cases. And I've had cases before, and if we look at this picture here, let's just bring it in. Where is it? There. Yeah. No, let's do a bit better. There we go. So this case is one that I've had for a while. This is containing a Raspberry Pi 4. It's got a couple of holes in it so that you can put it, a couple of screws in the wall and hook it onto. But that's usually not a very good, you risk shorting things out inside and things like that. It's really more geared towards sitting on a desk. It works very well. My Pi 4's been in there for a while, but I wanted something a little better. And I've done some projects before where I've had like here, where I do have Raspberry Pi type things. This controller here is a Revolution Pi Core 3, and this one is a Revolution Pi Connect. They're both based on Raspberry Pi compute modules, and then they've got some extended I/O and things on them. And you can see this is all nicely kneaded on a board with DIN rail. It's got a separate power supply in this case, a few relays and other stuff like that. But these are Raspberry Pi based products, and they're all nice and well and good, but they're a little more expensive. They're not hugely expensive, but they are a bit more expensive than a Raspberry Pi, and they're already in enclosure. They're industrial strength devices, but for most of us that's going to be a bit more than what we want to do. We want an economical solution. Bit of DIN rail is not expensive, but we at least want to be able to have our regular Raspberry Pis put into a case. So that's where Matic comes along. Let me get rid of that out of the way for a second. They sent me a number of cases. They have them for the Pi 3s. Now let me just zoom out a little bit again. There we go. So they have them for the Pi 3 and they have them for the Pi 4s. So let's have a look here. Yeah, these three are for Pi 3s, these two are for Pi 4s, and this one is just an optional fan that they sent me as well. One of the other cases I've used in the past is this one. Came with a Raspberry Pi. This has got a Pi 3 in it, but again, just designed for sitting on the desk. Another one I've got here, another Raspberry Pi 3, just sitting here with a heatsink on it, but again a little bit exposed. So we're going to have a look at these Matic boxes, see how easy they are to put together, and see how well they will work on DIN rail and other mounting. We're looking at the website, where is it, right here, and this is kind of like an exploding view of it. So you can see it comes in a modular system. The nice thing is you can mount it on a wall, you can mount it on DIN rail, you've got quite a few choices and the way you build it. And you can also extend the height of them and stack them. So let's just go in here, let's just pick one, the MaticBox Raspberry Pi 3 case. You can see here you've got a mounting plate, you've got the mount for the Raspberry Pi, you've got a mount for an extension, and we'll grab one of my extensions. I've got one of these boards, I think, or a relay box anyway, which we could see if it fits and everything else. And they're also supposed to be able to stack. So these will support the Raspberry Pi 3s. They'll also support Acer Tinker boards. So here we got the option for mounting. So you can mount on a DIN rail, you can put screws through with the base, mount it on a wall or you know, a piece of wood or whatever you want. You can even cable tie it if you really wanted to. Not suitable for outside. I mean, they're not providing any waterproofing or anything like that. The other nice thing is the cases are stackable. So once you've mounted the first one, you can stack up one or two other Raspberry Pis on top of it. All of the I/O is still accessible. Here's just showing it mounting onto a wall. How it all goes together in a little animation, which is rather nice. Different colors. So we've seen a white one and a black one here. I'm not sure what colors I've got. Automation cover. This allows us to, in this case, they put a relay board in there. Places for stickers and labels, slots for cables, so you can bring out some I/O if you had to. I'll provide a link to this page anyway in the description so that you can see it for yourself. Now, one of the really good things about these, if we go to the store, is the price of them. So here we go. We've got Matchbox 4, Matchbox 3. So let's look at the Matchbox 3. Let's just click on buy. So 6.7 euros. That's probably a little bit under $10. I don't know if there's a currency thing in here, but very, inexpensive. And let's look at the Matchbox 4s. So that's just a couple of euros more. So still, you know, $12. Very little amount for putting your Pi into a protective case and everything. If you were going to make a permanent installation, or even if it was just sitting on your desk, really gives quite a nice bit of protection. Color selection: black, graphite metallic, black metallic, and white. Yeah, so it looks like just the two colors well, basically the two colors. You've got black or you've got white with a little bit of metallic-y effect if you want it. I don't think they cost any more for any of those different options. So you can also buy as a separate option a small 5-volt fan for mounting in the box with it, and these are only going to cost you an extra 3.25 euros. So you're still under $20. You're going to get a fan, a case, mount it anywhere, stackable, etc., etc. Quite a economical option to protect your Pi. All right, let's go look at the real product, shall we? Okay, all comes in a nice little box. Fan support. Fan is not included, just be aware of that. So if you do want one of their fans, you can get it. If you want to just go get something from some other supplier for the fans, you're welcome to do that too. I personally like the Noctua fans. I use them a lot for my 3D printers because they're really nice and quiet. I don't know how quiet the one is they provide yet. For the Model 3, the Tinkerboard, Model 3B Plus, etc. Model 1, 2, and 3. So this one is a black one. Move the box out of the way. Bit of paperwork telling us how to assemble it. Much of what we've already seen on the website. So let's see what's in the box. So this is a smooth black one. So here's black cover, ventilation fans. Looks like it's injection molded, which I would expect for mass production. Little clips on the side, so there's no screw mounting this together. All clips together. And we've got the rest of the case here. So this should, there we go. So there's an alternative. This is an extended lid, as you can see from its size. You can choose to put this lid on, which is smaller profile, or this one, which will allow you to put a board on top of the Pi, I would imagine. Little adapter ring, spacer probably for the fan, I would think. Trying to get that to get a view there. This is a little fan mount. Get that out of the way. There we go. The fan to go on with some clips on the side to clip it into the case. Just clips on here. You can see we've got a inner but upper shroud here for the Pi, and it's marked, engraved with the devices. So we've got camera, we've got AV, we've got the display connector. Trying to get that so it shows up better. There we go. GPIO, of course. Power. Okay, let's just take the next level off. These are all quite tightly put together, and they need to be because you don't want them to fall apart on you. So here's we got the intermediate level, so the Pi would go underneath here. Okay, be mounted sitting on top of here, and this would go on the top. And then we have the base, which has still got one more level. On this last level, the base is normally screwed or mounted to something. There's a little lever on the end here. know if you can see that very well because black is terrible. I'll push it down, and then you can slide the lid off. Slide it off. There's on the very base that can mount on the wall, etc. You've got some little angled latches that will clip it in, and then you've got this little part here. I'm trying to get that so that it shows up. That will lock it in place. Okay, so you probably mount that up on the wall, click, slide down, and then everything else is all stacked like that. So quite a few little pieces considering, but gives you lots of options. Let's see if I have one in a different color. And here's a white one. Let's just put all these pieces aside here. So here's the white one. Same instructions, same basic construction. So here's the lid. Here's the smaller lid. The fan spacer if it's needed. Fan mount. And the whole thing comes off of the underlying case. Yeah, that actually does show a little bit of a side plate if you needed to cover up some of the I/O. I think that's partly to do with this top lid, so it would go in here if you don't need to cover the I/O. Actually, I don't remember. Oh, that one's actually fastened on there. And then again, the last piece, you can see it better here. This tab, you got to push it down a little bit, and then you can slide that way. So when you put it back on again, see there's the tabs on there. You put it into there, and it will click in place. So that makes it very, very solid. It's certainly not going to come off of there in a hurry. So that's for the Raspberry Pi 3. Let's pull apart a Raspberry Pi 4 one and see what the main differences are. So let's grab a Pi 4 one. We'll do it with the white Pi 4 one because it looks like it's easier to see. And I only have one Pi 4, so again, instruction manual. Fan lid. Sorry, low profile lid. Spacer for the fan. So same fan spacer. Same extension plate. So now we've got the same middle part, but things are rearranged here. So display, AV, camera, slightly different powers in the same place. But what's going to be different is these I/Os on the sides. So if I leave that one up like that and grab the Pi 3 case, right, there's the, you can see Pi 3, Pi 4, two HDMI outputs, AVI output, power input, USB-C. The ends are probably going to be very similar looking. So that's those. Make sure I get these back to the right ones. Not that it matters too much. And again, this one will should just clip off. Yep, just clicks off. There we go. And then we have the base, the same arrangement, little clip, and it will click off. So there we go. So that's two Pi 4 ones we've looked at, and a Pi 3 one. We'll just quickly check this last piece here, which is the optional fan that you can buy. Now this one is just a representation. The one you actually get may be slightly different, but it's going to still be the same size, of course. So obviously you can see the way this is going to mount. It's going to be needing a piece of paper again to see. Just slipped into the mounting pins on the carrier, and then it's going to plug into your GPIO to pick up 5 volts. That should just, let me just grab the Pi, we'll do a Pi 3 first. So grab the Pi 3 case. This has got no spacer on it right now, and the fan should just drop onto these pins. Now the pins do have little tines on them, so that once you've pushed it home, it's going to stay there. Usually the fan label goes in the direction of airflow that you want. I think we need to put that on a separate piece of, take that out so we can put push the fan onto it. Get rid of this. Boop, boop. There we go. So that would just push on to those pins, and that would be it mounted. Nice and simple. And of course you'll just wire this to your GPIO pins. Let's grab a Raspberry Pi 3. Here we go. Losing my bottom piece for a moment. So there's the bottom piece for the Pi 3. So it would mount this way. So there is a little latch. I'm going to zoom back in again. There is a little piece of plastic here that latches over the edge of the board. That also gives you access to the SD card on the bottom. So your board is just going to clip underneath there and drop in, and it looks pretty well. So you can see the fit is very nice. The little tab. So we got that. The next thing would be to fit the top cover onto it. So that would literally just go over the top. Now my heatsink's going to be in the way, but as we're going to just pull that off, it's a little bit gucky. That'll be okay. So now we can just clip, this will just slide on. It's got little nubbins on the side of here that just clip over the case. See the little indents in here? So that should just go straight over and click in place. There. Looks like everything fits nicely. No rattling around. If I wanted to, this heatsink as a heatsink won't fit. You'd have to get a smaller one. But of course, we have the fan that can go right over that. Fit quite nicely. I usually find with most Raspberry Pis you don't need, especially the 3s, the 4s do need a fan, so we'll keep the fan for the 4. They'll fit quite happily and run quite happily without a heatsink, as long as there is some ventilation. So that's the Pi 3 mounted in this case. Now the next question is, can we put a I/O device in there without any issues? Let's just put this bottom case, we'll just click it in. So that clicks down. Oops. Wrong way around. Just zoom out again. And here we go. So it just clicks in. So the holes in the bottom, we'll just click it together and push it down and slide. There it is, clicked into place. That makes for quite a nice solid, definitely nothing rattling around there. That's nice. Now at this point you can choose to just put this slim cover on top. Alright, like that. Just clicks into place. The fan's got plenty of room in there if you put a fan in. Or if you've got a GPIO module of some kind on, you can put the thicker lid on it, and then it also gives you access to an output here. Depending on what kind of module you have, that might be useful to bring wires out. Also a side slot for bringing wires out, and there's your side slot for all the GPIO wires if you were using them. Alright, now if you are mounting another one of these, let's just grab the Pi 4 one for a second. So here's the Pi 4 one. You can literally just you need the base part. So here's the base part for the Raspberry Pi 4. You can just click them on top. Clicks in place. Right. There's just a slight rattle there. So you can stack them up like that, right? And it makes for a nice little neat. So if you had that on that top one rattles just a tiny bit on there, but that's okay. It certainly is I'm pulling it apart in different directions here, not massive amounts of pressure. So I can pull it off if I want to, which obviously you want to occasionally, but it comes apart really, really easily when you want to. It doesn't just fall off, which is important. Okay, when it comes to the add-on boards, what I've got here is, this is a Raspberry Pi 3. I just popped it into the black case, and I've added a Raspberry Pi digital to the board. It's a Pi Face digital, but it's the V2 version, so it's smaller. I have a Pi Face digital 1 right here, and as you can see, it won't fit because the original Pi Face digital, I mean, it's got a smaller connector, but that shouldn't matter. But the I/O for the inputs is extending out where over the top of where the Pi 3 extra USB ports are. So it won't plug in at all. So that would have to be reserved for an earlier model Pi. Like this is a Raspberry Pi 1 original, and that's really what this is designed for. You see, it will go over there and it would plug in without necessarily having much of an issue, but it certainly won't fit in the newer boards. But what will fit in, of course, is the newer Raspberry Pi extension boards like this one that have a smaller form factor, and this is a Pi Face digital that again won't fit in. Now if you were putting the covers on top, of course you wouldn't be able to use this anyway, but that also doesn't quite fit in, and that's understandable. You know, a lot of my other cases it won't fit in either, and it's more of an experimental piece. You could design your own board that would fit in there properly. You just wouldn't be able to put the lid on easily, although you could do some cutouts. So let's just put that aside. This is a Raspberry Pi prototyping board if you were building your own add-ons, right? And that is going to fit in there nicely, I think, if I just try this. Get it plugged in the holes properly. There we go. So that fits in there very nicely. Quite low profile, so you could put some additional circuitry on here if you were wanting to. You know, temperature sensors, other kinds of I/O, CAN bus chips, etc., etc. Now, with this in place, very low profile, this thin lid will click on. Now, obviously, with this one, you've just blocked the fan from any circulation, but your lid will still click on nicely. It's not too fat or anything like that. In this case, you can see here that, let's just switch this to the white one. So you can see here that the white one, I put it in the white one so you can see it easier. The I/O sticks up from the top of the case. So what you would have to use would be something like this. Now, when you put that on, obviously it's providing cooling. It will just clip on, right? It's all nice and secured. You've got access to the edge I/O. You've got access, albeit rather thinly, to the I/O on this side, and you've got access to the GPIO if you had cables on this side. I am finding some of these boards are quite tight in here, so just be aware of that when you're designing. If you've got little burrs on the side from where they've been panelized, you may need to just gently file those off to fit a little easier. Some of the more modern cards may be more applicable. This one I've had for probably close to 5 years now. It's one of the older boards that came from Element 14 a long time ago. But anyway, it does fit, so it should work without an issue, and you can get, again, to the GPIO pins, to all the extension pins. There are knockouts and slots available for feeding out wires. So that should work quite reasonably well. But if you were going to stack this, right, so here's the black one with the Pi 3 in it as well, you can't stack it if you've got I/O on the lower modules. So the last one could have some I/O on. See, that would just stack on there. This one doesn't have anything on it, so I could, if I didn't have the base on, let me just take the base off. Right, don't have the base on it, I can actually just stack that together, and now we have two Raspberry Pis. They're pretty tight together actually. Stacked up. It could be in a DIN rail, they could be screwed to the wall, whatever you like. There you go, slightly better. And it works quite well. And as I said, top one still can have the vent on it. Now when you're stacking them like this, obviously the bottom one, even if you put a fan in there, it's going to blow air around, but it won't be quite as effective because there's no top full vent. But it still would help to keep things cool. So probably a preferred approach, if you have the room, is to put them side by side on a DIN rail. But if you don't have the room, they can stack, and as long as you're not overclocking and doing something ridiculous with them, then they should still stay cool enough. Okay, let's mount a Raspberry Pi 4 into a case to see how well that one goes and fits. I use a white case again, just because I can. I'll have to take the other Raspberry Pi out of the case that it's in right now, so just give me a minute. Okay, so I've mounted a Pi 4 into the Pi 4 case. You can see the fit is really nice. Again, there's no rattling at the Pi 4 or anything. It's very, very tight, nice, snug fit, so the manufacturing tolerances are pretty good. I've mounted the fan. I've just turned this on. And so the fan is producing a low whine, which is expected. It's a small 5-volt fan specifically for a job. Now it does stick above the case, so I've just trying to see if, yeah, that would hit the lid like that. Now this does have the spacer in it right now. Let's just take the spacer out and see if it will fit better without the spacer. I guess if you're having the expansion I/O board on top, that might be okay. So for this particular fan, as I said, this one is a representation. The one that you get with the production final version of the fans may be slightly different. So will the cover go on? So I guess the answer to that is yes, it will. You can probably, if I bring it up to the microphone, you can probably hear the slight whine. Nothing too much. The more important thing, if you need cooling, is obviously to keep the thing cool. And if you are stacking these, excuse the hands getting in the way. As you can see, they clip together, but they clip together pretty good. They're not in a hurry to come apart, which you wouldn't want them to be. I think I'm using the wrong cover there. It's not the wrong cover, but that's off the Pi 3 case. It's a slightly different white. Just slightly. I don't know if you can tell. This one off the Pi 4 looks like a slight off-white compared to this one. I don't think you have that choice. I think it's probably just a different batch of resins when they did the injection molding. So I'm not sure what this little hole is for. There we go. So you can easily stack this on top. Now let's see how close. So that fan is literally touching the bottom of this case when you put it in. The lids have got a slight recess in, so that's why they are going to fit over without an issue. But it is close. But they were clear to me when they sent me this that the fan is representation, not necessarily the final one. So I'd imagine that's one of the things they're going to be changing. Anyway, enough of the fan. Full access to all the I/O like we should have, which is perfect. Full access to the camera module, the LCD screen if you're going to bring out to an LCD screen. What else? GPIO is all available. So if they've notched around where the PoE, the power over Ethernet, is. I don't know whether you could add a PoE board to this, because it will probably cover this fan. You would, obviously, if you weren't having a fan on. The other thing is when you've got this fan mounted here, you're not going to be able to put a an expansion board in, because the fan would be hitting it and getting in the way. But that's the choices you would make. If you need the fan, you're not going to be using expansion. A lot of people's projects don't use their I/O inside of the actual Raspberry Pi or on the Raspberry Pi. A lot of people just use these add-on boards for development purposes and things. Now, it could be that Matic will come out with a few different options for the top here, where maybe the fan could be mounted differently. It's viable, I guess. We'll have to wait and see. But for basically having a Pi running, say, home automation, and you wanted to be able to put it on a DIN rail or just screw it to a wall panel or something like that, this is a very economical and sturdy way to do it. I'm actually quite impressed, both with the price and the accuracy. It's looks like a nice solid case. As I said, minor thing with the fan, but I knew that when they sent it to me, and it should be fixed for any of them that you get. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you this, but I did notice that they sent me this case. Let me just zoom in. It's going to be very difficult to show because it's black. This is the metallic one. I can see the little silver flecks and things that they added to the resin. I mean, if you're into worrying about the cosmetics, then this might be a nice option. And they did give me a little label as a representation, so they've got a little cutout here. I mean, if you were doing your own boards, you would stick your own label. You could make your own labels of the right size and just stick them in there, and they don't obscure the view. Anyway, you'd be able to just put a label in just like that, which would be great. I'll just power this off. I will do some further testing, and if I see anything untoward in the performance of these, I mean, there's not really much performance, but whether the Pi is overheating, and I've had them in, this case that I've had for a long time. I've had Pis running in here for months on end, Raspberry Pi 3s, with no issues whatsoever. My Raspberry Pi 4 was running in a different case. It was a metal case, all right, with two fans on, and your Raspberry Pi 4 really does need some kind of cooling, because it does get pretty warm even with you not overclocking it or anything. So if you're going to use a Raspberry Pi 4, I would definitely recommend getting a fan for it, or some other kind of additional cooling. Now, it could be that, again, Matic might add some additions to this. I don't know whether they have anything in here right now. Let's just go back to their website and have a look. So the fan that I've got was this Winsin fan, and as I just mentioned, it needed to be thinner. The one I have is 10 millimeters thick, and the one they have with a 25 millimeter edge to edge, the ones that they're advertising are 2507s. Now the 25 is the width and length, and the 07 is the millimeters of height. So they have got a 7 millimeter high one, which is excellent. Yeah, so not a big fuss to make. The one I've got, as I said, was an early version. I've had it for a little while, so apologies to Matic for not getting the video out as soon as they sent me it. But yeah, it's definitely already been taken care of. Okay, this is a piece of DIN rail. I can't fit it all on the screen at once because it's a meter long. That's how they typically come. And as you can see here, they have a profile to. They're like a little U shape with ears on the side, and you would typically screw them to a plate, either whether it's wood or metal or whatever. In industrial control systems, they use these all the time, and a lot of industrial control devices come with DIN rail mounting, whether it be power supplies. You've seen me use them a lot in previous reviews of some of my industrial control stuff. And these plates that have got the 4 holes on the side for screwing onto like a wooden board or a machine screwed plate or something. As we saw, you've also got the option of cable straps. But the other part that's in here is on the bottom. If I turn this over, you'll see that there's a couple of tabs here. There's a couple of little notches here for DIN rail mounting. And on this side, there's actually a spring-loaded piece here. You can see it doesn't move much, and it doesn't have to. But what happens is, if this is mounted, I'm going to do it the other way around, but pretend this is mounted onto some kind of chassis or frame or wall even, you would tuck it into the board. This would be the top. Okay, you would have the springy bit typically on the bottom. Gravity is your friend. It would hook into the DIN rail, and then normally you would just click it in. This is not clicking in quite so easily, but you would just use a screwdriver tab to bring that out. It clicks in place, and now that, I mean, it will slide around, but that's why I say gravity is your friend. It would be on a wall like that, gravity going this direction, and you can mount your device onto there like that. And you know, you can have two of them again on the DIN rail. Let's get rid of the fan for a moment. So even if you had two of these, it's not going to come apart easily. So now I've got two devices mounted in one DIN rail slot. So I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 and a Raspberry Pi 3, and they're quite securely mounted on the DIN rail. Right? It's not, I can't pull these are not pulling off easily. And all your I/O, USB connections, everything else can all come off the bottom into a wiring loop. Now remember, I just bring back the other picture I had earlier. Right? You can see all of these things are mounted. There's the DIN rail, one there and one here. It runs right underneath. I've got all of these industrial control devices, a little Ethernet hub, some DIN rail mount relays, DIN rail mount power supply. You can get all of this from Amazon or all over the place. This pretty much all came from RS Components. And so you can wire up a panel, and if you were doing something at home, home automation with Home Assistant, Node-RED, some ESP32 temperature sensors and everything else, this would easily be the this would easily be the hub of that entire system. And you can cut the DIN rail down. I mean, if you were just mounting the one device, you could just have a short length, all right? But you could also mount your DIN rails next to each other. You can get DIN rail mount power supply, just little ones. You know, you can cut this short, put a power supply next to it, so like a 5-volt DIN rail mount power supply to feed these. And it makes a nice, neat solution to wiring into home automation, office automation, even industrial. But if it was industrial, you'd be more than likely going back to devices like these Revolution Pis that I have here. But you don't have to. Depends on what it is you're doing. I mean, everybody talks about having UL certification and C or CE if you're over in the UK and things like that. But it's not, you know, that's not mandatory. It's all about common sense, really. And you know, you can, with 1 meter long, depending on where you're putting this, you can have quite a few Raspberry Pis or other devices, because even if you're using some kind of Arduino extensions, like for doing actual I/O or something like that, they can also be mounted onto a DIN rail. It makes very easy for getting these on and off. I mean, here, this is pretty, I mean, I can slide it, but you would have devices next to it as well. If I grab another one, and as I said, gravity is your friend. If it was mounted to a wall, you would just click it on like that, and then you would just pull this tab to get it to click in. It's not easy to click in. And now you've got two of them sitting quite happily next to each other, and you could have that stacked as well if you want, or you could have all three of them. Okay, so there we have now got three on a DIN rail side by side. Much easier to remove one than if it was screwed to a wall, because you just pull the little tab on the bottom and it would just, they're tight and you don't want it to be loose, but now you can just remove one. Right, click it back in, and there you go. Now you've got three of them going. You can put your nice lids on. And there we go. So we've got the Pi 4, Pi 3, Pi 3. This Pi 3 has extension I/O on the top, and they're all nicely mounted on the DIN rail. So that's perfect. I mean, that would make a nice, neat, you could put it on a wall somewhere. I actually have my Unify equipment all mounted on a panel on a wall, and if I wanted to have some home automation, I'd want to have it fairly close to that. So that would be perfect. It will be coolable if you don't have any I/O extensions on the top of the Pi, and as I said, I wouldn't normally recommend to be doing that anyway. I would be using the Pi as the main controller and then using Arduinos and things like that to add extensions via either serial RS485 or via Ethernet. Like I said, in my home I've got a number of different ESP32 based devices doing temperature measurement, controlling my wife's fountain when she wants a fountain on in the back room. You can set it up with a timer and all that kind of stuff. If you're running it from the Pi, then everything has to be hardwired from the Pi, etc. Using the Pi just as the controller, running something like Node-RED, Home Automation Assistant, many others, makes a very neat and tidy solution. So it says it supports the Pi 1, Pi 2, Pi 3 and Tinkerboard. So the Pi 1 though does need to be the B+, not the original. This original one won't fit in the case. And in fact I haven't had this powered on for probably a few years now. But the other ones, 3s and 4s, perfectly fine. If you get wanting to mount a Pi 4, you need to get the right case for a Pi 4 because the cutouts are different. Now I just realized when I put this together on the DIN rail, all of my power connections are actually off on this left hand side. If I just take one off the DIN rail here, so the power all goes in on these for them. Now technically speaking, if I had a 5-volt power supply, what I would more likely do is to have that 5-volt power supply rather than 3 USB adapters feeding the individual devices, and potentially bring the power in maybe through this slot and use a couple of wires into the header of the Pi, which would be much easier. Then you just have one power supply of maybe a 10 amp power supply, because each of these really needs about 2 amps each, and if you had other things around here like an Arduino or whatever, then you would need that extra current anyway. But yeah, something like a 5 to 10 amp power supply feeding all 3 of these, just feed it straight into the headers, save yourself a lot of hassle trying to route the wires, and you wouldn't have to have these like spaced out to make room for the sideways I/O. I mean, obviously if you were putting the HDMI outputs and things on these as well, then you would have no choice. But you could always stack them as well, and that would give you the extra room. They're all available on the side there. So yeah, a little bit of planning, deciding how you want to do this, a little bit of wiring. I was going to see if I've got a 5-volt power supply that I could potentially do this with. I think I might have. And I'll wire something up, and when I do that, I'll show you in a separate video. I do need to tidy up my home automation. As you saw on my little bench picture, I've had them sitting on the bench like that for a long time, and it needs to be cleaned up. So that's pretty much it, I think. Thank you very much to Matic for sending me these boxes, and I will be using them for my projects. I think based on seeing them and seeing the price of them, I would definitely recommend them. Get the cooling fan from them if you're going to be, especially if you're running a Raspberry Pi 4. But I mean, it would never harm to have a bit of cooling running on, and they've got the right size ones that are going to be shipped out to people if they want them. Good. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me do anything else with these cases. I would be happy to try some things. If you want, I will provide I'll provide links in the comments and description regarding where you can go to Matic to get these, or if there's any Amazon links, etc. And I will also update it if I find any other things out from Matic about options they may be coming up with in the future. That's about it. See you next time.